Welcome to the Ghostly Gallery podcast, a place where we explore the world of horror in film, television, books, and in popular culture. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. My name is Bruce Marcus, and as always, I'm joined by producer and assistant host, Tracy Asteria. Tracy, how are you?
I'm doing great, Bruce. How's everything going with you?
Things are going pretty well here. Very good. Can't complain. And very excited to get to the guests this week because this is going to be a little bit of a turn back in time. When we started this show back in, must have been June of 2023, our very first guest was the man who's going to be with us tonight. That is Harrison Smith. Harrison is a director, author, and horror historian. And he'll be sharing thoughts on the iconic horror film, The Texas Chain Saw Massacre. It actually will celebrate, it's hard to believe, its 50th anniversary coming up October 1st, 2024. The film debuted in Austin, Texas, and it was October 1st, 1974. Shortly thereafter, it gained more of a nationwide release. So 50 years of the Texas Chain Saw Massacre. We'll also talk to Harrison about some of his film projects, his book projects, as well. Harrison has directed such horror films as Camp Dread, Death House, and Where the Scary Things Are. He also wrote the screenplay for the 2011 film The Fields. And in the last 2 years, he has become an author. His first book, this time it's personal, A Monster Kid's History of Horror Memories and Experiences, came out in 2022. And since then, he has written I Lived the 80s, A Gen X Life, and the Pop Culture That Defined It, and also a book called The Making of Leprechaun, I Need Me Gold. So he's doing a lot of different stuff now. Harrison, welcome back to the Ghostly Gallery. Thanks for being with us. How you doing?
I'm doing well, and thank you both for having me. I'm really appreciative of being here.
Well, we got things started with you way back when as our first guest, and we're glad to continue that in this show. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about the Texas Chain Saw Massacre. As I said, it came out 50 years ago, and you knew very well one of the stars of that film, the late Gunnar Hansen. He, of course, played Leatherface. Your film, Death House, dedicated to his memory. I've never heard the story from you, Harrison, about how you and Gunnar first met. Tell us about that.
Sure. I was in Los Angeles at the screening for Zombie Killers with Billy Zane. We had a really nice screening with Misha Barton and Billy Zane and everybody, and Dee Wallace. And these producers introduced me to Gunnar's manager at the time and said, listen, we have a project that's coming up. We think you might be right for it. And it's with Gunnar Hansen. Well, as soon as I heard Gunnar Hansen, I'm like, okay, I'm all ears. So I met, I think it was 2 days later with the manager, and I met for lunch in downtown LA. And he pitched me this idea of, kind of like what they always called it the Expendables of horror. And I never liked that. And the reason why is, even with the actual Expendables movies, people still go into them thinking that these actors are going to play their iconic characters. So you have Bruce Willis and they think he's going to be John McClane, and Arnold Schwarzenegger is either going to be the Terminator or his character from Commando or something. You get what I'm saying. And I said, well, it's kind of misleading. I said, I really don't like it, but I understand the shorthand of it. And the shorthand of it is you're gathering all these names. So I understand why they went with it. And anyway, they said that Gunnar had written a script. He had passed the script off to another team of writers. I think it was 2 other people. They worked together as a team. And he was not happy with the rewrite. And he was kind of frustrated. And would I be willing to read both Gunnar's version, the rewrite, and then see what I could come up with? Well, I said I would. I like the idea that, they said we can get Kane Hodder, we can get this one, we can get that one. And okay, this will be great. And, quite frankly, as a horror lover, this is kind of like your dream. So it's pretty exciting. So anyway, I got the 2 scripts. They were printed. And I took them on the plane with me. I was flying, I think 2 days later. So I took them and I read them both on the plane on the flight back. And I read Gunnar's first. And I found that Gunnar's was very much what Gunnar readily admitted. He wasn't good at dialogue, and he had a problem with writing dialogue. So that was a big hang up for him. But what was important to Gunnar was the concept of good and evil. And he really wanted a story that was more than just killing people. He wanted this whole debate, especially over, does good need evil and does evil need good? Are they rather symbiotic? And I saw what he was doing. He said, I want this to be more like The Shining than I do Texas Chain Saw Massacre. So he wanted a very philosophical, very understated kind of horror film. So with that in my head, and talking with his manager, and I did talk to Gunnar by phone before I left, I would be meeting Gunnar later. I read his script and I saw what he was trying to do. Then I read the other draft. And the other draft is where the internet jumps to conclusions, because Gunnar publicly denounced the second draft. He was very upset with the second draft, and he denounced it publicly. And because the project had been gestating for some time, it had been in and out of the news, all the horror trades pick it up. You know how horror trades are. I love them and I'm very grateful for them, but sometimes they'll pick up on things that are really not much more than, well, I heard this is going on, that kind of thing. So anyway, I read the second draft and I understood why Gunnar was upset. The reason why is the second draft was just torture porn. That's all it was. To give you an example, Gunnar's original draft focused on a group of college kids in a college class whose professor is really more of a philosophical professor and kind of ties in his hobby of urban exploring. And they go to this old asylum where they go down into the bowels of the asylum to find that they find that basically they're not alone, that the inmates that were in the asylum basically, they retreated to the bottom is where they were, in the catacombs. And then, hilarity ensues. One by one, the college students are picked off. But there were different things about it, the way that Gunnar wrote it, that they weren't just slash and kill. However, the rewrite was definitely that. The rewrite, to give you an example, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm being chased by homicidal maniacs in the catacombs of an empty asylum, I will often stop for oral sex along the way. And that's exactly what happened to this guy and girl. She decides that, now is probably the perfect time to give him a blowjob. And, while you have these freaks chasing you, and then they catch them both because, well, why not? And they took the woman. I remember they took the guy first. They cut his genitals off and they slammed an iron spike through his crotch to make it like a phallic symbol. And the girl, they basically did a Terrifier and they cut her up the middle. And then they kind of nailed her to the wall. So that's why Gunnar hated that script. And from him saying it, from him saying it, when I came on board, there were already people in the chat rooms and the horror know-it-alls that have no connection to the industry whatsoever. But boy, they love to get on bulletin boards and talk away, said, oh, this guy's coming on board. He wrote The Fields and all that, but Gunnar, he's lying. This project is dead. Gunnar doesn't like his script. I'm like, whoa. First of all, that's not my script. I haven't written the script yet. They were talking about the second draft. So yes, Gunnar did disown the draft. He did not disown Death House. There, you can find that online where they say, oh, Gunnar Hansen disowned his own project. That was not the case. So then I finally got to meet Gunnar. I went up north. I went to New England. We had dinner, and we talked for, my God, it was 4 or 5 hours. And we went over everything. And he said, there are these elements. They were called the 4 evils, but they were not called the evils. They were the 4 horsemen. So there's a lot of biblical stuff there, the apocalypse. And, he really, so I took deep notes, copious notes, excuse me. And I think I had a pretty good understanding of what he wanted. So I went home and I talked to him by phone. I said, okay, I've got things out in an outline. And I like to go write sometimes out instead of being at home, because you get disturbed at home. And, I love my family dearly, but I really don't think they think I have a real job, because I don't go to a cubicle, because I don't have a desk in an office building somewhere. I don't really work, kind of thing. And a lot of people, and Bruce, I'm sure you understand this, a lot of people don't understand what it takes to write. I know it sounds pretentious when it's like you need to be in a mood. You just can't sit down and write. I mean, you can, but it's usually going to be crap. But you need to be in a mood. You need to have an atmosphere. You need to have some music. You need to have your mind like, okay, I know where I'm going today. This is where I'm going. And if you're interrupted with the dogs and this emergency, and you've got to run here, and then there's this errand, and can you mow the lawn, and blah, blah, blah. So there are times where I literally have to leave my home, to be untouched for at least 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
So that was one of these days, and it was around Super Bowl time. And they came on with an ad for, I think it was the first Jurassic World at that time. It was this exclusive ad. And I sat there and I'm watching it, and suddenly it hit me. It was like, well, why does it have to be an asylum? We've seen that many, many times. And I thought, what if there was this prison, and instead of dinosaurs being kept behind caged bars, we have the world's worst criminals. And then the ride breaks down, right? And we got to get out. We got to get out of the ride. We got to get out of the amusement park. So it was a little Escape from New York meets Jurassic Park is really what it was.
Yeah.
And so I fleshed this all out. We have 2 FBI agents, a male and a female, top of their class. They are getting this tour. They asked for this for their, they performed, certain tasks. So they get these like kind of bonus requests. And, the one was to see Death House, the infamous Death House they learned about in class, which Death House was more than a prison. It was an experimental scientific lab where really a lot of the MK Ultra experiments took place inside this prison. So I brought this back to Gunnar, and he loved it. He's like, this is great, because I structured it in the way of Dante's Inferno. There are 9 levels of hell in Death House. And at the 9th level at the bottom are the ultimate evils. And I changed it from the horsemen to the evils. And I added a woman to make 5 points on the pentagram. And they were known as the 5 evils. And they were housed down there. And, the only way out is to go down to them to get them to see if they will help, because there is no way up. That's the problem. So Gunnar loved all of this. He loved the Dante references. He loved the philosophical good and evil, especially with the way that the film opens. The film opens with Bill Moseley saying, "Who weeps for Satan, the original sinner?" And at the end, where Bill Moseley is eloquently saying, well, why is there, when there is a disaster, they call it an act of God? Why aren't they calling it an act of Satan? So what is God? God allows death. God allows children to die, molestation, all these things. Maybe God needs us. That's why we need to be out. The world is imbalanced because we have been imprisoned here. We need to be out there. So then we get into what's real, what isn't real. There's a little matrix thing going on. We find that these agents have had their minds wiped. And there's a lot going on in the film. And that's what Gunnar wanted. He did not want a simple tale, because really, frankly, in the second version, it was a lot of like almost like an R-rated Scooby-Doo episode. Remember when they used to find the celebrities, and they'd be like, "Oh, it's Phyllis Diller, famous actress and comedian." And it was almost like that, like, okay, if we make that version, oh, look, there's Sid Haig. Oh, look, there's Tony Todd. And there'll be these guys in these medical, not scrubs, but patient outfits, with the crack in the ass up the back. And that's what we're going to see. So, you'll have Sid Haig for 3 minutes and Tony Todd for 3 minutes. And they just kind of coming on and off the screen. And that's not what he wanted. So it was during this time after my second meeting with him that I found out that he was dying. And I had no idea at all. And that explained, the first time I met him, he said, when you go home, you might have to catch me by phone. I'm kind of doing a family tour around the country. Well, it was his goodbye tour. In hindsight, we know. But at the time, he never said a word, and he did not look ill. So he had pancreatic cancer. And it was only after meeting with him the second time, and he didn't look so good the second time. And that's when he told me, he said, "I'm dying." Wow. And he said, probably will not live to see this get made. And I remember him telling me, film scenes on my grave if you have to get this out there. Now, his idea, which I think was genius, and not because he's dead and trying to suck up, I think his idea was to create this movie for his fans. And he wanted it circulated totally on the horror convention circuit. There are how many of these conventions all over the country? Instead of wasting the money on a theatrical release, book it where people will buy a ticket at these conventions. Your audience is already there. And they have gigantic projection houses and arenas, or sometimes they rent a theater just down the street where they could do this kind of thing. And that's what he wanted. And he didn't quite get that. I always felt that was a mistake to not go the convention route.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was pure genius. And your audience is right there,
We should mention about Gunnar Hansen. He was not just an actor. He wrote other screenplays. I believe he wrote books.
Yes.
Very intelligent guy. Tell us a little bit about him away from the screen. I mean, he has the on-screen persona as the monstrous Leatherface, but his personality was quite a bit different than that.
He was a gentle giant. I even joked with him. I said, in an alternate universe, you could be Santa Claus. Like that's how he was. He was low spoken. He had very little regard for the internet. He didn't like the way that people fight and argue all the time on the internet. And he said that was a major turnoff for him. He knew the internet. He wasn't one of those like, I'm so old, I don't know how to do this. He knew how to surf. He knew how to do all of that. And he told me a story of a kid. How did this go? This kid said something to him online that the Texas Chain Saw Massacre wasn't all that he finally saw it. This kid saw it, and it wasn't all that everybody said it was. And he kind of told Gunnar off, this is just a shitty movie, and you got famous for the shitty movie. And Gunnar said, the only reason, he goes, I didn't want to respond. He said, that's the worst thing you can do. But he did. And he responded very politely. And he, I guess, tried to school the kid in the way of, well, what you're saying is an opinion, but there really is no critical data to back up what you're saying.
Yeah.
And the kid wrote back something snarky, like a one-liner, and then what the kid did, this is the crux of the story. The kid turned around and blasted everywhere online that he could, that he pissed off Gunnar Hansen, that he upset Gunnar Hansen, Leatherface, but he spelled Gunnar's name wrong.
Mm.
And that's what Gunnar felt was so funny. He spelled it with an E, you know?
Yep.
And he's like, the kid obviously shows his ignorance here that he doesn't get it. He's just a kid, you
Yeah.
know, he's just a dumb kid. And so I think with Gunnar, his personality, especially being so gentle and soft spoken as he was, uh, he just wanted to avoid all of that. He had said many times it was kind of like the internet. Yeah, I remember him saying one time it was a briar patch, and he just didn't like it. So he stayed away from that. He loved to write. He loved philosophical writing. And he must have loved The Shining because he evoked The Shining many times.
Mm.
And what he loved about The Shining was the esoteric ambiance of the film, that the hotel was evil. That's what he liked. He said, I couldn't care less about Jack Nicholson. He said, I remember him saying, I loved what Kubrick did with the hotel, with the Overlook. And that makes a lot of sense. You know, you can see why that attracted him, because the Overlook itself has a history, you know. And what's sad is that Kubrick did shoot a lot of those scenes of the history of the hotel, and it never made it to the final cut. In fact, the scene where Shelley Duvall comes running in when she hears him screaming, he's having a nightmare. If you look on the table, there's a large scrapbook sitting on the table. Jack had found the Overlook scrapbook in the basement in the boiler room, which all those photos and newspaper clippings showed the very sordid history of this hotel, which was supposed to inspire his writing. And in the book, that's exactly what happens. Kubrick, for whatever reason, got rid of it. And that's a shame.
Hmm.
So I think that's what attracted Gunnar. I think that's what drove his writing in other projects. And he wanted to take a high esoteric philosophical road. I'm speaking for him. He may, if he were alive, go, Harrison, you've got that totally wrong. But that's what I took away from knowing him.
Sometimes an actor, when he looks back at a role that kind of made his career, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, certainly made Gunnar Hansen a household name in horror. Sometimes they kind of reject that film. They get tired of talking about it. They don't want to hear about it anymore. How did he feel about Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Well, not indifferent. He was neutral with me because our talks really weren't about that. And I think him knowing that his clock was ticking, I don't think he wanted to get hung up on any of that. You know, I mean, I think in Gunnar's eyes, and really that is a problem with the internet and DVD extras and endless documentaries, is how much more can you say?
Right.
You know, like how much, that's why when people ask me when I did the Leprechaun book, why didn't you interview Warwick Davis? And I could have. The answer was, well, he wrote it in his autobiography.
Yeah.
Everything he wrote about the movie, making the movie, is in his autobiography. What's he going to tell me new that he didn't put in his own autobiography?
Yeah.
So I talk mostly to the filmmakers. I talk to the director, the writer, director, writer, Art Jones. I talk to David Trippett. I talk to people at Trimark, the marketing people and all of that. So I think with Gunnar, I just think he knew he didn't have time.
Yeah.
And there was no sense in wasting time on talking about a project at that point was 40 years ago.
Right.
Yes, he's Leatherface. Yes, they made the scary, I think the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, in my opinion, is a perfect horror film. And so they did something great, but that's not what he was interested in talking about. And I'm always pretty good at reading the room, especially with celebrities. I just finished a book on John Carpenter's They Live. And I didn't interview Carpenter because he's so reclusive, but I got to interview Alan Howarth. And It was more than just making They Live. It was John's point of view on the Reagan 80s and how They Live dovetails with the Reagan 80s and the yuppie movement, all that. But here's what I got out. Here's my point. The point is that Carpenter made it very clear in the number of interviews that I saw of his, that I used. He doesn't like talking about his work. His attitude is I made them. I made them. They're out there. People either like them or they don't. And I don't really care. You know, I think Gunnar was the same way at this, but I know that Gunnar had a clock ticking. So I didn't broach it. I just did not bring it up. It was kind of like, oh, what was it like to be Leatherface? Like, oh my God, you know, and how many times does he get asked this stuff at a convention? You know, how many people come up, oh, what was it like to work with Tobe Hooper? What was it like to do the, and people mean well, but for an actor like that, it's like, and especially doing these conventions sometimes, my God, a dozen times a year, it's got to be grueling. It's just got to be grueling.
Oh my gosh. He sounds like a lovely person.
He really was.
I really appreciate, sharing those memories with our audience.
Yeah, I hope it ain't going too long. You can edit this, but.
Oh gosh, no, listen, I think it's fascinating to see, different views on what people are like, especially you knew the man. So I think that's phenomenal. And I think our listeners will totally appreciate it as well. So I remember seeing this movie back when I was in my 20s, and I just recently watched it again to prepare for this. This movie, it terrified me. I remember at the beginning of the movie, it had mentioned, that it was based on a true story type of thing. I've since learned that that's not really true, but Leatherface was loosely based on a real killer.
Yeah.
And this, yeah, and then the story is totally fictional. But man, it really, I still feel really uneasy watching it because I feel that, something like that can still happen, at any point, anywhere. I don't think it's that far-fetched of a thing to happen,
Sure.
And it's just, the thought just terrifies me. So that film, I love it, but it just terrifies me. But man, what are your thoughts on this movie? Would you mind sharing a few thoughts on that?
I think here's the thing, from a from a fan point of view with horror, I love it. It's so much fun. And let me get to that part first. Let's get that out of the way. So I was too young when it came out to see it. I was, my God, I think I was I might've been 10, something like, I was a kid. And with a title like that, no way is anybody going to let you go see this thing. And this was a time before, the internet blasts everything all over and takes all the fun out of it and the mystery. You saw the trailer on TV, or if you went to the theater, but I didn't, let's face it, the movies I was seeing as a kid at that time, that trailer is not going to play on the front of those movies.
Yeah.
So you saw it on TV, and the previews scared the shit out of me as a little kid. So and then especially when they say based on the true story, like, oh my God, there's somebody out there hacking people up with a chainsaw. Jesus Christ. I mean, if you saw The Fields, my movie, I always thought Charles Manson was out to get me. Now this guy with a chainsaw is going to come for me. So, especially that scene where, he rips open the door like that and comes right. I mean, I can still see it as a kid. Like, you sit there and cover your eyes. And so anyway, I didn't get to see the movie, until it came to home video.
Yes.
And I rented it one night with some friends and I watched it. And here's the thing. All these years, I built this up to be some gore fest, that this was going to be entrails and heads and limbs cut off. And no, no, there really wasn't much of anything like that. There was a lot of sound that scared you. There was a lot of stuff implied that scared you.
That's right.
I walked away from it both disappointed and impressed at the same time as a teenager, because I had a couple cute girls in the room with us. We watched this as a group, and you're hoping that they'll be all grossed out and scared. They need comforting, that kind of stuff. And although they were scared, it wasn't the gore fest. And I remember thinking, oh, damn it. But then I'm thinking, wow, like that's impressive. And I knew who Tobe Hooper was because years before that, before I saw it on home video in the 80s, I saw Salem's Lot. And I loved Salem's Lot. And I still do. I think it's cheesy, but it's still, unless we see what comes on Max coming up, it's still the best adaptation of that book. And it was made at a time, like, I think I'm impressed that it got away with as much as it did for a made-for-TV confine,
Mm-hmm.
So what I found impressive about Tobe Hooper was he's extremely efficient. And I had seen the Funhouse. I saw the Funhouse in 1981, I believe, and I saw that in theaters. So I liked his work, but Texas Chainsaw, everybody get, wait till you see Texas Chainsaw. So we watched it, like I said, but I was still scared. Like, it still bothered me. It didn't scare me like, oh, I'm so scared somebody with a chainsaw is going to get me. It was more like my mind kept running after the VCR turned off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what a good horror movie should do. And I just remembered thinking, like, kind of like Psycho, it's a lot more tame than I thought it was going to be. On the flip side, then that's not a negative thing, because on the flip side, it's a testament to just how efficiently written and directed that movie was. It hit every beat. It works on every level. It doesn't have to go to, gritty sex. It doesn't have to go to gory blood and limbs. It's just a damn good, scary story. So here's the best part. A couple years ago, about 2 years ago, I showed it to my daughter, who is not a horror fan. She doesn't really, it's Gen Z. I don't think they even like movies anymore. If it's over 35 seconds, their attention span taps out. However, I remember showing her The Shining, and because I guess she had heard too, oh, it's so scary and blah, blah, blah. I did not tell her that, because although I think The Shining is extremely well made, I think it's incredibly dull. And about an hour into it, she turned to me, she looked across the room, she goes, is anything going to freaking happen in this movie? Right? But Texas Chainsaw, that was different. When that was done, she raved.
Oh,
She was
wow.
like, that was a great movie. So that's high praise coming from her, because, and here's the thing, she sat through all of it.
Yeah.
Right? I think she was 13,
Wow.
14 at the time. And she sat through the whole thing. And she'd watch it again. If it were on, she'd watch it again. So that tells you how well made that movie is. So I hope I answered the question, because for me, from a director and a writer's standpoint, the script is as efficient as Jaws. Jaws is an extremely economical script. Everything is used. Everything works. There's no fat on the script of Jaws. Everything is lean and it moves. Every line pushes the story forward. There's no, exposition where, we're talking forever and ever and ever. And I mean, it's really simple, with especially that town hall scene where Brody says we're closing the beaches. Just the way everybody interacts in that scene. We don't need a 10-minute scene of talking about why we have to close the beaches. In about 12 lines, we get it all. And that's amazing. And that's how Texas Chainsaw works. Nothing is wasted. Everything works. It runs on all pistons and it fires completely. And it's extremely efficiently told, deftly directed. And in my opinion, as I feel that Psycho was Hitchcock's greatest movie because of those kind of things, the efficiency, almost the poetic screenplay.
Mhm.
That's how I feel about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think it is Hooper's greatest movie. I'm going to say it's going to be controversial. As you know, there's a whole faction out there that says yes, and a whole faction says no. I do not believe Hooper directed Poltergeist. I think he walked along with it, and Spielberg called the shots. That's what from all the research I've done and people that I've talked to that have worked on the film, Hooper was a mess by that point in his life. He was there because Spielberg could not direct 2 movies in a year.
Mhm.
It was E.T. or Poltergeist. And the only scene that stands out to me that has Hooper's signature on it is the picking the face apart scene in the bathroom.
Right.
So, and I may be wrong. I could be wrong. I wasn't there. I'm only going by the data that I have looked at, and I've tried to look at both sides to see that no, I really want him to have directed it.
Mhm.
But even as a kid seeing Poltergeist in theaters, I didn't walk out thinking Tobe Hooper directed it. Even as a kid, before all these stories started, it had Spielberg's stamp all over it. But that's my opinion, and I'm sure there are plenty that disagree with me, and it's only my opinion.
I think that's pretty cool, though. I'll have to look into that. I don't think I even heard that story before.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
It's pretty touchy in some circles. And one more thing I'll say about it. I did a podcast on this, and you can find it on my cinema podcast.
Mhm.
I can email you the episode that it was, but I looked at Hooper from the standpoint that he was one of those directors, I think very much like John Carpenter and George Romero, that flourished under low budgets. And when they were given vast amounts of money, they fumbled. And because studios, number one, didn't know what to do with them, and they tried telling them what to do. And that didn't work with their guerrilla kind of independent filmmaking flair.
Mhm.
So what backs me up with Poltergeist is Life Force. Because Life Force, I don't care what anybody says. It may be, there's some cool effects in it and stuff. That movie is a freaking mess. And that movie was one of the major reasons why Canon will go bankrupt. Because they bought into a multi-picture deal with Hooper, based, I think, predicated not just on Texas Chainsaw and Salem's Lot, but also because of Poltergeist. So they thought they were going to get, Life Force was a big screen movie. It was a big budget movie. And it is a little budget movie packed into a big budget movie. And it is a total mess of a movie. In fact, unintentionally funny in many spots. They were not going for campy humor. They thought they had something, space vampires. It is a mess. And I've seen the different cuts of it. I've seen the extended cut. I've seen the theatrical cut. I saw the theatrical cut in theaters. Then I saw the extended cut. Neither cut is any good. It doesn't matter. You can't polish a turd on this one. There's some cool effects. I don't ever use, except for Jaws the Revenge, I never use a movie sucks. But with Life Force is problematic. And the problem also is it drained Canon's money supply. It bombed. And then they had already bought into 2 other pictures with him, and that would be the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which, in my opinion, I just did 3 books on the director Kevin Connor. And this is my opinion. My opinion is Tobe Hooper stole Motel Hell for Texas Chainsaw 2. He stole elements of Motel Hell because Tobe was approached to direct Motel Hell first, and he turned it down because he had just finished Poltergeist and he was doing Funhouse. Not Poltergeist, Salem's Lot, and he was rolling into the Funhouse, and he turned down Motel Hell, but he had read the script. And there are huge amounts of Texas Chainsaw 2 that I feel are lifted right from Motel Hell. So that tells you something that, and plus, I'm only going by what I know. So I always phrase it allegedly. Allegedly, he had a lot of emotional, mental, and substance abuse problems.
Oh, interesting.
So by the time Poltergeist rolled around, he was a bit of a mess himself. He gets into the Canon deal. He makes Texas Chainsaw 2. That bombs. Okay. And a lot of people greeted, you've seen Texas Chainsaw 2, right?
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
It's not great cast. Dennis Hopper, Bill Moseley. It's great in that way. And it's not a bad movie, but it was the audience looked at it almost like, is this a fucking joke? Like, what are you doing with this? This isn't anything like the first film. Now, on one side, you can say credit to Hooper for doing something different, right? He just didn't give us the same movie again. But it came out at the wrong time. It was 1986, 87, somewhere there. We were in a different movie era at that point. We were in the era of Aliens and Top Gun and Reagan era, militaristic, Spielbergian kind of fantasy action. We weren't ready for something like that. That should have come out in 81, 1979, 1980, 81. It would have fared better. But then Canon found out, okay, that bombed. So now they have Life Force, which tanked. Now they have Texas Chainsaw 2, which tanked. And then they went into Invaders from Mars. And that tanked. And that was an expensive bomb for them as well, too. All of this took money away from Superman 4 because they slashed Superman's budget. Cannon bought the rights to Superman with the hope of making big screen movies. Since Life Force failed, and they did it right around that time with Life Force, they thought Superman will do it for us. Well, they cut Superman's budget by, I want to say, close to 19 million. They took 19 million away, and the movie shows it. I think I can't give you the exact figures. You can find them, but they drastically took away a crippling amount of money that would destroy Superman 4. And quite frankly, here it is. Tobe Hooper's at the center of all that.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Hooper is at the center of all of this. And I think by the time Invaders from Mars rolled around, Cannon had buyer's remorse. They entered into a multi-picture deal with this guy, and quite frankly, they shouldn't be throwing money at him. Keep him on the low budgets. That's where he thrived. So that's why that backs me up on Poltergeist, because Poltergeist had a very healthy studio-run budget. And I don't see where Hooper had the chops to maneuver through a studio, especially MGM. And, the people that were behind all of that, I don't see it. I don't see it. From what I understand, Spielberg came on set. Hooper was with him. Spielberg told Hooper, I want this, get that. Hooper directed it, said, but he's only doing what Spielberg whispered into his ear and told him to do.
Yeah. So you're really saying that Hooper peaked with Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Salem's Lot, another great movie, and then really his career after that didn't kind of live up to that early promise. I do want to go back to one thing, Harrison, and I thought it was a great point that you made about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It is this shocking film, especially for its time. But as you say, it's really not that gory. The camera often cuts away at moments of impact. You think about that scene when that poor character of Pam is thrown up onto the meat hook. There's not a single drop of blood there.
Right.
You probably, after the movie's over, you probably thought, wow, that was a gory scene and there was all that blood, and there was not any of it. And I thought that was one of the brilliant things that Hooper did in this film, is that he gave us that power of suggestion, but by cutting away or maybe stopping short in certain scenes, by not showing us a lot of bloodshed, he really did something I think that was kind of artistic.
Absolutely. I think, yes, I would classify, I think Texas Chainsaw, if it hasn't been already, should be one of those selected for protection by, the Library of Congress. I think it should be preserved. It is a masterwork of terror and suspense, and by far it is Hooper's best work. And he worked on it with nothing. He had nothing. He had to rely on his creativity, his inventiveness, his inspiration, spontaneity. The problem was you throw a lot of money at him, and with that money, it's not just like they threw buckets of money at him. Then you have a lot of people in your ear.
Yeah.
You have studio executives. Well, you got to do this. You got to do that. The polling shows, our audiences are skew this way, and you've got to have this. I mean, one of the big problems that Hooper faced is that, the lead character, what's her name, is naked. I mean, it's full frontal nudity the whole movie.
Yeah.
Right. And they were worried that was going to be a turnoff. So should she be dressed? And if she isn't dressed, do you put her in like underwear? If she's not in underwear, well, does she, do we just crop her from the shoulders down kind of thing? Just see some cleavage and leave it at that. Maybe a bare behind shot once in a while. Like, you have all of this in your ear. I mean, David Fincher can attest to that with Alien 3 and William Peter Blatty with Exorcist 3 as well. Studio meddling really is a problem.
Yeah.
So, and maybe he didn't deal with that well. Maybe he didn't have someone as strong as Spielberg now on his, behind him, right? Literally over his shoulder. It's kind of like by proxy, many argue that George Lucas really directed Return of the Jedi. He was on set for almost that entire shoot and basically over the shoulder of Richard Marquand almost the entire time. And we can see Lucas's influence, right? We come from the dark and very different, esoteric Empire Strikes Back, and we go into a movie with Ewoks and silly creatures and Chewie doing a Tarzan yell, swinging over the fuzzy teddy bears. And you can see Lucas's influence there, right? Everybody goes, well, Empire was so great. Yeah, because Lucas was off shooting Raiders of the Lost Ark. He wasn't around. He showed up for maybe a week. And here's the best part. Lucas says the Empire is the weakest of all the films.
Harrison, let's talk about some of the performances in the film. Marilyn Burns playing Sally Hardesty. Everything I've heard is that she went through absolute hell and terror. It was a scorching set, 90 degrees, 100 degrees, high humidity. There's one scene apparently where she's being hit with a hammer by that older actor, Jim Seedlau, who played the cook. And he actually hit her with a hammer to make it look more believable. I mean, what she went through in making that film and then delivering that performance, remarkable.
Oh, absolutely. I think, look, today you can't get away with that. I mean, I guess you can, but, unless you have somebody that's going to cooperate with you, you're not only going to get Me Too'd, you're going to be run right out of the industry. I mean, we saw this happen with Shelley Duvall. Kubrick destroyed her. I mean, I watching that poor exploitative Dr. Phil episode on Shelley Duvall remind me a little bit of Marilyn, because as a director, look, in the end, I know this is going to sound terrible because I'm not I don't know. I think Kubrick may have been a great filmmaker, but everything that I've ever read or understood, I never met the man, is that he was kind of an ass as a human being. I don't see the point in that kind of method directing to put an actor through that kind of hell. I mean, there are certain things you can't escape, like you had said, temperature. I know I saw an interview with her once where she had discussed also the insects were terrible, bit, constantly all the time. You're fighting all these. Those are things that come with the project. That what are you going to do? You're shooting a low budget film on location. You don't have a climate controlled studio. When you have a climate controlled studio and you're coming into your actress's hotel room at 4 a.m, banging garbage can lids to wake up your actress and terrify her and deny her sleep like Kubrick did with Duvall. I don't want to hear, well, it made her look at her performance. Yeah, the scene on the steps when she's swinging the bat. I mean, I think they shot that all day. I think that holds the record, does it not, for the most number of takes? And he did it deliberately. He didn't have to do it that many times. He did it to burn her out, to drag her down, and it's like, why? It's just, in the end, it's just a movie. So with Marilyn, the hammer, all of that stuff that, the physical manhandling, being thrown around, tossed around. That's a lot. And I just don't see, even if this were 1973 again and making it, I couldn't as a director justify that. I can't. It's kind of like, I remember when Susan Backlinie said, they broke her ribs opening Jaws, right? They put her in that harness and they're yanking her back and forth. And that scene where you hear her when she grabs the buoy and she yells, "Oh my God, it hurts." She's yelling that because they broke her fucking ribs. Right? Like, that's real. And it's like, okay, we got it. But at what price did you get it?
Yeah.
Marilyn puts in a hell of a performance. There's no doubt about it. When she's scared, I believe her. That's what makes the film resonate so much. But behind the scenes, I don't know. I don't know if well, here it is. I do know. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that. And because to me, it's kind of silly to do this and like put somebody, other than the things you can't help. Heat, you can't help. You can make sure you have water on hand, hydrate, take a break, get people into air conditioning when needed. Even in Death House, to give you an example, there was a lot of physical stuff in Death House. And for example, those creatures in the freezer, we were shooting in a prison that had been built in the 1800s. And we were shooting in April, and cold air went through there so badly that the snow was actually moving through the hallway. And the people that are playing those creatures were stark naked underneath very thin latex that was covered with a liquid. And I made sure that they each had warming tents. So when between takes, get out there. I mean, I could say, no, stay in there, freeze. You got to be the character. These creatures, they're kept in this thing. You got to put in that perform. For what? It's just a horror movie. Right. In the end, it's just that, and especially now. I mean, especially now where stuff has gone to streaming in 3 weeks, 2 weeks, and then it's forgotten. Audiences now have such a forgetful memory. The Alien Romulus, in 6 months, it'll be what? Which one was that? Right now, it's 285 million. It's the biggest movie in the country. Blah, blah, yeah. 6 months. I forget what happened in that one. I'll watch it 16 parts on TikTok. So with Marilyn, I can't justify it. I'm glad. Look, I don't know how much of that torture went into her role. I'm sure that it had something to do with it. It's almost hard to deny that, but it's just, I can't justify doing that to somebody.
Yeah. She was scheduled to appear at Scaricon in upstate New York back in 2014. And sadly, she was not in good health. She passed away shortly before that convention. I'd been hoping to meet her, maybe even talk to her a little bit. So that never occurred. Did you ever meet Marilyn?
I never did.
Never did.
I never got to meet her. I never got to talk to her. No. But that would have been something I would have liked to have asked her.
Yeah.
What did you, I mean, and then again, what more is she going to say? Yeah. And you have to be careful because everybody is so butthurt on the internet that even if this woman talked about that, it was a little rough. They hit me on the head with a hammer. There'd be people, oh, suck it up. Toby Hooper is a genius. He was a genius. Suck it up. How dare you talk badly about Toby Hooper? Shut up.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with that. These all come from people that have never been on a movie set. They don't know how it works. They don't know how safety standards and protocols work. It's just one of those things where you're not bad mouthing him. You're calling it like it is.
Sure.
If he allowed her to be struck in the head with a hammer, if at first it was an accident, hey, dude, be careful with her. Don't let that happen. Okay. Or, you know what I mean? Like, but if he lets it keep going, no.
Yeah.
You don't do that.
Harrison, I wanted to talk about two other actors quickly in the film.
Sure.
One of them is John Dugan, who played Grandpa.
Yep.
The level of makeup that he wore, it was just something remarkable. I mean, I kind of thought he was an older guy to begin with, and it turned out he was a very young guy. And they put all this makeup on that made him look like about 134 years of age. And somehow, with all that makeup and all that heat, he delivered a pretty good performance. Not only horrific, but also kind of funny, too.
Yeah. Oh, well, look, any good horror film has humor. Even The Exorcist has humor.
Yeah.
Even Psycho has humor. But with him, I got to meet him, by the way. I got to have dinner with him.
Yeah.
And I think again, performance comes from the actor. I don't think you need to torture them. That's how I feel. You know, things happen. Like we said, Susan Backliny, I don't think Spielberg was looking to break this woman's ribs. It was a pulley system, got out of hand. It's an unfortunate accident, but I don't think Spielberg was like, oh, suck it up, get back in the water. It's only, you can't do anything with them anyway. We could run you to the hospital, but they're only going to put an ace bandage on you. Get your ass back in the water. I don't think he did that. You know, that'll give a great performance. You know, what, for the one line, oh my God, it hurts. That's what we broke her ribs for. So, you know, again, you have layers of makeup on and the heat. Yeah, I mean, look, it's the actor that did that. They pushed through, they got it done, and that's what was important. So, you know, again, the director is there to not just direct the scene, and I need to get what I need. I need to get that shot. But it's also, you can get that shot by showing your actors you care about them and their welfare.
Yeah.
You know, Kubrick told the crew and the other actors to ignore Shelley Duvall, to isolate her, to marginalize her, so she would feel isolated and off. What the hell is that?
No.
You know,
Yeah.
What is that?
Not a good way to make a film or
you're an
to
asshole.
conduct business. Certainly.
Right there. And there's people out there. He just called Kubrick an asshole. Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Because you don't do that to people.
Right.
These are people that got paid. I mean, the girl's hair was falling out.
Yeah.
That's
right. And now look how she ended up.
Yeah.
And then she just died a month ago. And everybody's like, oh, Shelley Duvall. It's like, hey, how about somebody call out Kubrick, who probably contributed in some way to this woman's mental decline?
Yeah. One final actor to talk about from the film, and he maybe plays the craziest character, Edwin Neal as the hitchhiker, who, you know, for some reason they give him a ride, even though he's very strange looking, and his behavior is even stranger than his appearance. I mean, he starts rambling about head cheese and other things, and then he offers to take a photograph, pretty lousy photograph. He wants them to give him $5 or something for it.
Yeah.
I mean, his character was just out there. Edwin Neal did a great job in that role.
Yeah. Yeah, he did. And here's the thing. He's kind of the precursor. It's not really a precursor. Here's the take. The take is the Manson family ended the hippie movement. They ended it. And when you see Edwin in Texas Chain Saw, that's all you remember of the hippies. You remember that they are these murderous, crazy freaks. That's what you remember. So he evokes the whole Manson thing, which was still very fresh in the minds of America. As a matter of fact, I don't even think Helter Skelter, it might have just been published at that time.
Right.
I think it might have just been published. So a lot of what the Manson family did and those girls did still was not for mainstream knowledge. So this guy was kind of like our media boogeyman. is really what he was. And he represents, don't hitchhike. Don't hitchhike. I mean, the Manson's family, they ended hitchhiking, right? Although, I mean, I shouldn't say ended it. They ended the glorification of it. People still hitchhiked, of course, because serial killers, that's how they get most of their victims half the time. So, but it ended that glorification of, I'll just hitch across America, right? Then you pick up a freak like this who's cutting himself and, hey, he's kind of like, remember Harry the Bomber on the Muppets? That plunger? That's who he reminds me of. He reminds me of Crazy Harry.
Oh my gosh.
So he's blowing shit up. Right? And that Muppet was so scary. You know that Disney got rid of him. Like, they don't even acknowledge that Muppet since they bought the Muppets. They don't even acknowledge Harry. So that's kind of like what Edwin was. And he's kind of like the harbinger of doom. He's kind of like, well, you're going down the wrong road here. Picking me up, took you off course. You are done now. Like, whatever it is, you're marked, you're cursed, whatever it may be, that's happening now. So if they had just kept on going, minding their own business, they'd have been fine. But they picked this guy up and it took everything off course, which leads them, you think he's the scary one. Now he's just the appetizer, right?
Yeah.
The main course is coming up. And then you think at first, well, it's Leatherface. No, it's that whole freaking family.
That's right.
Right? It's that whole damn family. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Hey,
they had their warnings. I mean, if they didn't get the message from the hitchhiker, and then the guy at the gas station who's the cook basically keeps telling him, don't go to that house. You don't want to be going out there. These girls don't want to go out there. He flat out tells them not to go, and they still go.
Yeah, they still go because they're stupid, right? That's right.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, I agree with you because I automatically assumed like, oh my God, he's got like this Charles Manson aura about him.
Oh yeah.
Just
no accident
creepy.
there. That's not a coincidence.
No, exactly. And Helter Skelter, since you mentioned it, that was a fantastic book. I love that book.
And the scary part about that was just not to get on the Manson thing deeply, but really, I saw Vincent Bugliosi speak at my college.
Wow.
I if it wasn't for him, I don't think they would have ever put it all together.
Oh my gosh.
I don't think they would have ever gotten Manson. It was, the cops, a lot of the investigations were just so inept.
Jeez. I can't believe you got to actually hear him speak. That would have been.
It wasn't long before he died. Yeah.
Wow. I have a little bit of a technical question for you. It was reported that, like you had mentioned, that the budget for the Texas Chain Saw Massacre was like pretty minimal.
Yeah.
And for a film from like 1973, 74, there was like no CGI, like no digital special effects. So the crew was using like animal pieces, human bones, and real skeletons. It definitely created a ooky, creepy atmosphere for sure. I don't even know what that would have been like on set, but I think it would have terrified me just to be there. I'm just curious, if you were to make this film today, like, would you use stuff like that? Or would you just go for total CGI or like the technical skills from prop masters or, special effects people? Like, what would be kind of like the method today? You wouldn't use real skeletons, would you? Or would you?
Yes.
Oh, really?
The answer is yes. And you can find even Dread Central and all of them know this about me. I am a huge proponent for practical effects.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can use, legally real skeletons, I'll use them.
Oh,
sure.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Yeah. I mean, if because again, I don't know how you procure real skeletons. I'm sure there must be a place where you can get them. The boneyard, I don't know, but some big box, big casket box thing, right? Open box. However, the answer is yes. I would use practical for everything that I possibly could. And that's the way I love to operate. CGI for me is more of a tool and not be all to end all.
Right.
Although, again, a lot of people will look at me as outdated because, AI is going to take this all over. So I wrote a 19-page letter to SAG-AFTRA last year during that strike, which said that very, very clearly. And, it's going to change. But the short answer is yes, I would use everything practically that I could. And if I could procure legally real skeletons, I would use it. Yes.
Oh, that's such a cool answer. I didn't know if, people would still use something like that today.
I'm skeletons in a Poltergeist.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. Just with like you had mentioned, like AI and stuff like that. I'm not a huge fan of AI work. So yeah, I was just kind of curious what was the going way for people to do those kind of effects today. Oh, sweet. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Harrison, one final question on Texas Chainsaw Massacre before Tracy gets into some of your upcoming projects. We know this is a classic film from 50 years ago. It's a classic, no question about it. There have been a lot of sequels and prequels that have been done since then. Do you feel any of them are worthwhile? Not to say that they come close to matching the original, but any of them that are at least decent or worthwhile for fans to watch?
I mean, I guess, you have to look at them though in context. I think that's the best way to look at them. If you look at them as just straight up prequels or sequels to that original 1974 film, I've always said this, and I wrote it in my book, in my first book, that horror is dependent upon the time that it is created because it emerges from the society in that era at that time. This is why they're having a bitch of a time with Friday the 13th and A Nightmare on Elm Street rebooting them because those monsters are no longer relevant. That's the problem. What stopped Jason Voorhees was not Corey Feldman. It was AIDS. AIDS ended the have sex and die motif in slasher horror films because now we had something out there in real life that was killing you. And Nightmare on Elm Street was already devolving into a quasi Freddy Krueger stand-up comedy show anyway. But 9/11 and terrorism, Columbine, all of those things created new monsters. And kids look at a Friday the 13th, and I'll go back to your question on Texas Chainsaw, because I'm answering it through all of this. And that is, kids look at Friday the 13th now and go, summer camp? Like, kids actually went to a camp? Like, what? They don't do that. They all sit inside all summer long and game. They're on their headsets and they're texting, whatever the hell they do, Snapchatting, all that bullshit. But, they don't go away for 3 months to a summer camp, even as teenagers, or have teenage counselors. Camps still exist, but they're not the thing that they were in 80s films. So how do you bring Jason back and make him relevant? Nightmare on Elm Street, with kids suffering today from so many psychoses and anxiety problems. We have an anxiety-ridden generation of Gen Z and now Generation Alpha. Freddy is not all that scary. Like they have their own demons. They have their own monsters in their heads. So Freddy, that's stupid, right? They look at, like, my daughter, I had Amanda Wiss herself FaceTime my daughter before watching A Nightmare on Elm Street, because I still say Amanda's death in that entire franchise is the most disturbing and haunting one out of all the films, because she is so brutally destroyed in an almost combat style of filmmaking. And Amanda FaceTime my daughter. It's just me. I'm alive. And my daughter, I think, was like, all right, I'll be polite. I'll listen to all this. But she knew all of that. And when the movie was over, I said, well, she's like, it was all right. Now, when I saw it as a teenager in a room full of people, I saw it in the theater, by the way, almost alone, because it it didn't do well in the theater, but it did extremely well on home video. So the summer after it came out, I rented it. I brought it home. I was working at a video store. I brought it home, had all my friends in the room, and there was this one girl we just graduated, and she was in my class, and we were great friends for years. That movie scared her so badly, I had to drive her home. And I had to sit at her house. Like when we got home, she was like, would you like to come in? I'm like, yeah. All right. Nope, that's not why she wanted me in. She was home alone and she was terrified from that movie. So something happened. So in the way of Texas Chain Saw, the hippie movement is over. The Manson era, most kids don't even know who Charles Manson was. They've grown up with stranger danger. They've grown up with, pedos all over the place, right? And now you have Megan's Law. And now you can get online and you can see what sexual predators are registered near you, So they live with that every day. And in addition, something else has changed. And what has changed is that we have shifted the focus away from Leatherface being a villain to an almost sympathetic type of creature. And they all have these backstories now. And so in that way of watching these other films, I don't know, does Leatherface really need a backstory? Do we need to know? Leatherface is more scary as just this big behemoth that jumps out of that sliding tin wall. The same with Michael Myers. Do we need to know, like in Rob Zombie's movie, that he came from an abusive family and blah, blah, blah? And do we need to know all that? Michael Myers was scary because he was like a tornado. He could touch down on one side of the street and kill two people over there and totally walk by your house and leave you alone. Well, a tornado will do that. It'll touch down in a town. It'll wipe out one city street and leave the other perfectly intact. Or destroy one house right next door to you and yours is left standing. We don't know why. That's what makes them scary, because they're totally random. They're forces of nature. When you start personifying these villains and you start giving them backstories, start inflecting more or injecting more comedy or dark humor into them, it's kind of like, well, if we don't take them seriously, well, then why should you? And I think that was the feeling of Texas Chain Saw 2, that people were like, I'm not sure what I'm watching here. Am I watching a dark comedy or am I watching a horror movie? Because the first one was straight up horror. There's some elements of humor in the film. Like even with Grandpa hitting her on the head, like there's something darkly comical about that. But it wasn't being played up for laughs. But now we have scenes like in Texas Chain Saw 2, where it's like this is openly being played for laughs. And now we're combining gore. So that's why with the new Texas Chain Saw on Netflix was met with such derision, because it's trying to go back to the feel of the original film. But the problem is we don't live in the time of the original film. So it's kind of like Stranger Things. You can get the feel of it overall right, but the context is gone. Like, to give you an example, in Stranger Things, it's like, do you remember in the season 1, they're downstairs in the basement and they're playing Dungeons and Dragons, and on the wall is a poster for The Thing. And I remember seeing this the very first time in season 1 with my wife. And I said, that's bullshit. She's like, what do you mean? The Thing came out in 1983, right? You said so. I said, no. No teenager had a Thing poster in their bedroom because the movie bombed. The movie failed. It was a disaster. Okay. It's now heralded a classic and a masterpiece, which it is. And I did see it in theaters. But even if I had, I was, totally fundamentally transformed by The Thing, there was nowhere to get a poster. Right. You couldn't go to KB. They weren't selling them in Walden Books. There was no merch. The only way you got that poster, like I did, is I worked at a movie theater as an usher when I was 16. And nobody wanted it. That poster sat up in the bin. I took it. I came there 3 months after the movie opened and nobody wanted the poster. They left it sit in the bin. I'm like, the thing? I'll take that. That's how I know. The same thing upstairs in Will's brother, Jonathan. Jonathan has an Evil Dead poster on his wall. That's for the Duffer Brothers. Nobody had an Evil Dead poster on their wall. The Evil Dead came and went. And then it came out on video where it got a second life till Evil Dead 2 came along in like 87, which basically remade the first one anyway, because Sam Raimi said probably fucking nobody saw the original one anyway. So I'll refresh your memories. And for the first part of the film, we're just going to remake the first one. Right? But no kid had an Evil Dead. And I was the horror kid. If you go back and talk to any of my classmates, that kid, not only was I class president, I was the horror kid. And I had a thing, but that's because I got it from the movie theater. So my point is, you can go back and make the Texas Chain Saw Massacre as detailed and nuanced in the 70s as you want. But your younger audience is not going to get it because they didn't grow up during that time. So they don't understand the Manson movement. They don't understand the crazy hippie movement, the drug movement, the counterculture, the burn it all down attitude. They don't know any of that.
Mm-hmm.
So for them, this is like, I guess it's like I said, it's like in The Fly when he said the computer knows the molecular makeup, but it doesn't know the taste of the meat. Right? It's very similar this way. You can make I can make a new Texas Chainsaw tomorrow, and I'm telling you, it would be nuanced like you wouldn't believe. And it will do no better or worse than any of the others that came out, because these movies, and let me segue before we talk about me, because this is really what you wanted to talk about. These movies are not being made for young people. They're being made for people like us. That's why the David Gordon Green Halloween films are nothing but fan porn. They're nostalgia porn is what they are. Oh, look, it's Lonnie from the very first film where Dr. Loomis told him to get away from Mike. Who the hell cares? Who cares? He doesn't bring anything to the story. He does nothing other than for some 48-year-old guy sitting next to me going, oh my God, that's Lonnie. Shut up. Grow up, dude. You're 48 with kids, and the kids are sitting next to him going, I don't get it. How many times have I gone to a horror convention and you get some guy that's like my age coming up, oh my God. Like I was there with Robert Englund one time, and Robert's signing, and this guy is telling the whole story about how he saw, I mean, I've had drinks with Robert. I have never told him about the first time I watched A Nightmare on Elm Street. I've never told him because Robert's just like, I don't care, but he has to care. He sits at the table. And the best part is I understand the guy's excited. He's meeting his idol, blah, blah, blah. I get it. But then you got his kids standing next to him, and they look like they could be picking lint out of their belly buttons. So I said to the kids one time, this is what also helped inspire my book, other than that shitty Jaws the Revenge movie, was the kids. I said to the kids, do you like coming to these things? And the one kid said, he looked right at me, he goes, I don't even know who that fucking guy is. That's Robert Englund sitting right there. He's like, I don't even know who that fucking guy is, but my dad is ready to pay $200 to get a picture with that guy. I'm like, well, that's Krueger. And the kid goes, Freddie, I don't know. Right? So these movies are not being made for new audiences. So we are making them. So then Netflix goes, I don't understand all the hate for the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because you've got people, most of the hate comes from the people 30 and under. That's where it's coming from, because they look at it and they go, I don't get it. They watch the first one and they go, all right, yeah, I guess. There's no blood. They say that now about the original Halloween. for those who know that there was a 1978 Halloween and not Rob Zombie's movie being the original, or the 2018 now they think is the original. But, they look at that and they go, oh my God, it's like an hour in and nobody died. There's no blood. And that's why David Gordon Green and the boys in the new Halloweens made sure we're going to give you your fucking blood, and you get the knife up through the jaw and you get this and you get that. Okay, we're going to give it to you. That's to get the kids that you drug with you. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the 48-year-olds and up are going, that's Nurse Chambers. Oh my God, Nurse Chambers. And the kids are going, who? What? And as a screenwriter, I'm going, how the hell does this help the story? What does she do other than show up? What does she do? It's Scooby-Doo. That's what it is. Look, it's Nurse Chambers. Nurse at Smithfield, whatever it was, Smith Grove Sanitarium. So?
Oh my goodness. You have a really good point there. My kids, if you were to ask them about, Michael Myers or, Freddy Krueger, they're 17 and 15 years old. They have no idea. And I'm a huge horror fan, sci-fi fan, but those boys, they don't know a thing and they don't care to, at least not yet.
No, that's, you nailed it. That's the problem that I have. I'm not old enough yet to sound like, oh, this TikTok and these kids, you sound like Congress when they were talking to Zuckerberg. So do you need internet to run the Facebook? I'm not that way at all. I'm very proficient in AI. I know more about AI than probably the average Zoomer does right now. Most of them can't even fucking figure out how to do a basic web search. Right? All they know is Snapchat and taking 150 pictures of themselves and ask them to do a web search or chat GPT. They go, I don't know. Why do I have to do that? I don't know how to do that. Right?
Exactly.
But, take 150 selfies. Well, they can do that. No problem. So for me, I'm not old enough yet to be ranting about this. What you said is the issue. They have, unlike us growing up, they have so much power of information in the palms, literally, in the palms of their hands, and they simply choose not to know. That is true ignorance. When I was a kid and I wanted to know about filmmaking, you had Fangoria, Starlog, and a couple books that came out here and there, maybe. I remember Tom Savini's book. I bought that. Dick Smith. I was the only idiot kid in 4th grade to get Dick Smith's makeup book. And then, of course, I'm sure the teacher wanted to call home to my mom going, is your kid fucked up? Why does he have this book? Right? Everybody else is getting, where the red fern grows. And I'm getting, how do I make the fucking Frankenstein monster in my kitchen? So, you know what I mean? So that's what I mean. They choose not to know. They don't want to know. And I'll pitch it later. And literally they will watch movies in 15 parts at 2-3 minutes each. That's not how a movie was created. So when I do show my daughter or someone her age these movies, they go, well, it's a little slow. It's called character development.
That's right.
It's called plot development. I know, I'm sorry, nothing happened in the first 30 seconds to hold your minuscule attention spans. But and that's really what's also hurting horror. We don't have any slow burn horror films when we do, but they're not getting the attention that they should. Everything's got to be slam bang in the beginning, and we've got to bring back this one. Look at Alien. Did you see Alien Romulus?
I have not yet.
Talk about nostalgia porn. Okay, there are things in there that even there's nobody. I wrote, as Bruce had said, I wrote a whole book on the 80s about my life. No one loves the 80s more than me. And I'm sitting there going, can you just give us something new? Oh my God. I'm sick of all these tossbacks to 80s horror and 80s movies. And, and then you have that whole horror group out there that thinks there's nothing outside of horror but Freddy, Jason, Candyman, and Leatherface, that there's nothing else out there. It's only those. And we got to just keep making these franchises and making these franchises. Oh, I'm sorry. And Michael, we've got to just keep making them and making them and making them. Don't try anything new. Because see, then when people go out and actually make something new, then they get on the internet and they shit all over it.
That's
Right? See, that's the problem. So that's why you've got Disney doing what it's doing. You want more Star Wars? We're going to give you plenty of Star Wars. We're going to go right back to the original Star Wars. We're just going to remake the original one, and we're just going to keep shoving the same regurgitated shit down your throats all the time, and you're going to like it. So anyway, I'm off my rant.
That's okay. I wanted to ask you about a couple of your projects, if you have a few minutes. I'm really not sure how much you can talk about this one. Eyes in the Trees. It's a script that you wrote with Mike Manning, and it's going into production this October in Thailand.
Correct.
Stars Anthony Hopkins and a great range of supporting cast members. So I don't know if there's anything that you can share with us about it, or if there's like an NDA. Are you going to be taking part in any of the filming? Like, will you be on set for any of that stuff?
I was invited to be on set. Michael came on board to punch up some dialogue. He's acting in it as well, too. So I think he also, as an actor, wanted to put his spin on the character. I'm not allowed to reveal too much of the plot as of yet. I can tell you that the original script came to me by a guy named Jason Ussery.
Okay.
And I rewrote it as kind of Vietnam with monkeys. It's kind of like Apocalypse Now with monkeys.
Oh, cool.
And then it kind of morphed and changed over the years into the present script where it is now. And Hopkins gravitated to the material, which is great. I mean, hey, it's nice to have Anthony Hopkins attached to your film. Shooting in Thailand in October. The producer, Artisha Mann Cooper, is just wonderful. She's the main reason why this got made. Just dogged it and dogged it and dogged it. She believed in the project. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. I plan to go to Thailand, to watch them shoot it. As a writer, you do your bit. I have a producer title on it as well, because I brought, certain elements to the table early on, but then things changed. But overall, I mean, I hope it turns out great. I think I don't see why it wouldn't,
Oh, nice. Do you expect to see that in like 2025, or will we be able to get, 2025. Okay. Oh, that is awesome. And you have a couple of new projects coming out. GPS, Trope, and Hopkinsville. Are they ready for release, or?
Trope is releasing September 12th.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. That's why I was late. That's why I missed you yesterday. I was literally getting ready for all of this when the producers called and said, hey, they're releasing Trope September 12th. The last I had heard, it was October.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, whoa, what's what? And I got all caught up and, we got to get promotional materials out, Well, what's BET do? Like, we're just all cross-referencing, which was the problem. I got totally caught up. Then Bruce emails me. I'm like, oh my God, I forgot. So that literally hit. And then I was under the script deadline, which I promised I would have the script this morning. So, overall, with Trope, that's a September 12th release. GPS is done. I shot GPS in July.
Right.
And shot it in Hollywood out there. And that'll have a 2025 release. I just don't know when. I know that it's going through the first cut right now, and we're getting visual effects lined up and all of that stuff. But it's a lot of fun. Again, has a bit of an 80s vibe to it, or vibe. A little bit more of a little Texas Chainsaw feel to this one. So the killer is definitely got a little bit more than a smidgen of inspiration from Leatherface, which is by design. And then with Hopkinsville, it's reverting back to its original title, which is called Little Green Men.
Oh, nice.
And Little Green Men is the phrase that actually came from a true, allegedly true, alien invasion story in Hopkinsville, Kentucky in 1954. And when the sheriff came out to talk to this family on this farmstead, he wrote on his police report, farm was attacked by little green men. And that's where the phrase came from. So my script is about this account. And I've taken a number of fictional liberties.
Mhm.
It was a big family in real life. I brought it down to a husband and wife
Mhm.
with their kind of like housekeeper on the farm, a young girl. And there are a lot of twists and turns. It's got almost like a Shyamalan feel to it, which is what I wanted, but I'm very proud of the script. The script has gotten excellent coverage. And then speaking of excellent coverage, I'm getting ready to pull the trigger on a true life serial killer movie called Break, which
Oh,
is
nice.
based on the true story of, you can look it up, then the serial killer, the Bone Breaker.
Mhm.
It was, and the only reason I wanted to do this, I optioned the survivor's story. This 13-year-old kid escaped. He got away with almost every bone in his body broken.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So anybody with children, it's your worst nightmare. However, it's not going to be a Saw movie. It's not going to be a gross out movie. I'm taking a very high road with it.
Right.
It's going to be incredibly suspenseful and intense. That's what I want. It's more misery than it is Saw
Mhm.
kind of thing. And I'm very excited about that. The boy who escaped, his name is Thaddeus Phillips. And you can look it up, but it's a harrowing tale. And when I heard it, what attracted me was that he lived, that he got away. And again, with literally almost every bone in his body broken. It was
Oh my
72
God.
hours of hell for that kid.
Oh wow. You have a lot of really great projects coming up, and I'm definitely looking forward to them. That Little Green Men especially.
Yeah, I can't wait to do Little
Yeah.
Green Men. I'm excited for Little Green Men.
Oh, nice. And if I just have just one more minute, your book, I
You
lived the 80s.
anytime.
Um, I loved that book. I got the audio version, and I absolutely loved the stories that you told in that book. The journey that you took the readers on was
Oh,
phenomenal.
for I Lived the 80s?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I remember you mentioned that you might do a follow-up to that or some graphic novels. Is that still something you're
Oh yeah, I
considering?
can send you the graphic novel is almost done.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'm going to publish it normally like a published collection of graphic novel books.
Mhm.
However, I'm looking into AI, and I'm seeing how Kindle can handle, but that actually when you're reading the graphic novel, certain of the characters will move, that they can actually, you'll get movement in the
Really?
graphic novel itself, to make it more immersive is what I'm trying to do. Um, but the graphic novel follows the book. I mean, it's my life.
Mhm.
I was very lucky to be part of the graduating class that I was at Stroudsburg High School and to be their president because, like I said, I lived a John Hughes life, but it was more risky business and Wolf of Wall Street. I mean, the whole thing about the
Yeah.
activities director and class advisor trying to get me, that was true. And I still remember, I think you're making porn with that movie camera of yours. And I turned around, I just was like, it doesn't have sound. What kind of porn am I making without sound? Like, do I put a title card up? Ooh, yeah, right there. Give it to me. Right. And it's in that 1920s script,
Right. Oh my gosh.
Super
Oh,
8,
wow.
making Super 8 porn. Like, that's how I'm making money? No, that's not how I'm making money. And it's funny, my daughter went with my wife with me. We had a mini 1985 class reunion in October, this past October.
Mhm.
My daughter went and she got to see a lot of these people that I've talked about so much and in my book.
Mhm.
And she just walked away amazed. She was just like, I can't believe a class was this close. And, like, especially when you're able to give receipts on your stories, like a lot of people tell stories and you don't know if they're true. People validate these and corroborate these across the board. Like, yeah, I was there. That's how it happened. Yep. He did do that. Yep. We did do that. So it's, I don't need to elaborate. It was that much fun.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, that's so cool. I appreciate you being here and sharing all of these stories with us. So you've
Well,
made my
thank you.
definitely worth the wait. So thank you.
Well, I'm very appreciative of that. I'm glad so you listened to the audiobook.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
You heard the part then when I start laughing. Like I
Yes.
kept that in. I kept that in because that story is so funny that I'm just like, I got to keep it because it's so real, like I could have edited it out, but
Oh gosh. No,
laughing in.
I think it was absolutely perfect because I would just put my earbuds in and just put it on as I was doing my work, and you just burst out laughing. I burst out laughing, and people are
Yeah.
looking at me, and I'm just like, yeah, you guys need to
I
listen.
wish I could have reenacted my mother's reaction when I told her I lost my virginity the night before. Because I still see her sitting there with that cigarette at the kitchen table at 6:30 in the morning, and I just rushed home. This had all happened. I'm no longer a virgin. And I just had that incident at the four-way intersection. I don't know if you remember that in the book, but that guy that I almost T-boned this guy at a four-way intersection because my mind is just going like, I just had sex for the first time. Oh my God. And this girl was so drop dead gorgeous and right. And I blew through the intersection at 6 a.m. and this guy in this big old boat, I almost hit him and he stopped and he rolls down the window and he had white hair. I remember that was like white gray hair, a big dude, but he was probably too fat to get out of the car to kick my ass. That's probably what it was because he didn't get out of the car. But I'm sitting behind the wheel. I'm like, oh my God, like my heart's going, like you just realized you almost died. And he yells like, what the fuck? Didn't you see the light? What the hell's wrong with you, kid? And I rolled down my window and I just did it like that. I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I just lost my virginity last night. I wasn't thinking. And the guy is looking at me like, what the hell are you talking? And he just rolled up the window and drove away. Like, that guy went home and you're not going to believe what happened to me and what this kid said to me. So then I get home and there's my mom and she could tell I was all rattled. And I just sat down and she goes, so what'd you do last night? I said, well, you want the truth? She's like, yeah. Well, I had sex with Kelly for the first time. She goes, sex for the first time or sex with Kelly for the first time? And my mom always smokes. So let me hang on here. She always had a cigarette, So she's doing that. And I said, well, both. And she just does that. She's like, yeah. So how was it? And I go, well, it's not like the movies. And my mom just went like this. I shit you not. My mom just went, never is.
Oh my God.
Well, I don't know how to follow that up other than to wrap up the show.
Right.
We do want to thank Harrison Smith for giving us so much time, hour and a half of really insightful stuff. Harrison is, as you can tell, someone who speaks his mind, somebody who has definite opinions, but can also back them up. One of the most creative people in horror history and someone we always enjoy talking to. Filmmaker, director, writer, and author. Harrison Smith has been our guest. Harrison, thanks a lot. As always, we enjoyed it.
Well, thank you. I'm greatly appreciative of it, and I had a lot of fun.
Same here. We wish you the best of luck with all these upcoming projects, too. We want to thank, in addition to Harrison, Tracy for doing a great job as our co-host and producer. We thank all of you listeners as well for joining us in this Museum of the Macabre. And we hope you'll join us again next time, right here in the Ghostly Gallery.